In 1972, a film was released that didn't just change the history of cinema, it became a part of American cultural heritage, an epic poem of power family and betrayal. The Godfather made an indelible mark on its audience. With its story of the Corleone mafia family, the work was not only a colossal commercial and artistic success, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture, but it also became an unforgettable part of an entire generation's memory. But behind the classic characters, the immortal lines, and a world so violent yet so seductive, were actors with their own very separate fates. Lives, even more dramatic and tragic than the film itself. More than half a century has passed, and time has etched different marks on their lives. Some continued to shine brightly. Some had to wrestle with their own demons, and there were also those who had to stop their journey in tragedy, leaving their stories unfinished. Let us look back at the tumultuous journey of the cast that brought the soul to the Godfather. Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather. The character of Don Vito Corleone is not just the head of a mafia family, he is a king, a symbol of quiet power and majesty. With his hoarse voice, sorrowful eyes, and slow, calculated gestures, Don Vito left an indelible impression. Marlon Brando's performance at the time, at age 48, was a brilliant portrayal of an aging patriarch who transformed a monster into a respectable, even pitiable figure with his self-made cheek pads, and a phenomenal immersion into the role he created one of the greatest performances in cinema history, earning him his second Academy Award, before The Godfather. Marlon Brando was already a legend, a giant who had changed the art of acting with roles in A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. But by the late 60s, his career had stalled. The Godfather was a spectacular comeback. However, behind the camera, Brando's life was a never-ending storm. He went through 3 turbulent marriages, all of which ended in disaster. But the greatest tragedy of his life came from his own children. In 1990, tragedy struck when his son, Christian Brando, shot and killed the boyfriend of his half-sister, Cheyenne, at Brando's own home. 6 years later, Cheyenne, after a long battle with depression and addiction, hanged herself at the age of 25. Brando publicly admitted that he was a terrible father, drowning in guilt and sorrow. He became withdrawn, obese, and an alcoholic. The glamour of a legend was now overshadowed by the darkness of family tragedy. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of Don Vito Corleone was a complete opposite of his fate. While on screen, Don Vito was a father who deeply loved and protected his family, willing to do anything for his children in real life. Marlon Brando was a failed father who had to watch his own family be destroyed by violence and tragedy. Created the ideal father figure on screen, while his own life was a tragic story of a father's failure. However, that journey of glory and tragedy had to come to an end. On July 1st, 2004, Marlon Brando passed away at UCLA Medical Center at the age of 80. The cause was respiratory failure due to pulmonary fibrosis and congestive heart failure. He also suffered from diabetes and liver cancer. His ashes were scattered in Tahiti, his last paradise, and in Death Valley, along with the ashes of his best friend, Wally Cox. The legacy he left behind is not just his roles, but a thought-provoking life story of a genius who could not save his own family. James Caan as Sonny Corleone in The Godfather. The character of Sonny Corleone was the embodiment of hot-headedness, violence, and a ferocious life force. He was the eldest son of the Corleone family, a ticking time bomb always ready to explode. With his confident swagger, sneering smile, and uncontrollable rages, Sonny left an indelible impression. James Caan's performance at the time, at age 32, was an explosive portrayal of a man destroyed by his own temper. Sonny's tragic death at the toll booth is one of the most haunting scenes in film. This role earned him an Academy Award nomination and cemented his status in the film industry. After the success of The Godfather, James Caan's career continued to flourish, but his life was as full of turmoil as Sonny's. He married 4 times and all 4 marriages ended in divorce. He had 5 children, but his relationship with them was often strained. James later admitted that he regretted not being more present in his children's lives. The 1980s were his darkest period. After losing his beloved sister to leukemia, Khan fell into depression, abused drugs, and disappeared from the screen for 5 years. He even considered giving up acting. What saved him? Seeing his own dog emaciated because he couldn't afford food. That moment spurred him to fight back. Outside of acting, Khan was a 6th-degree black belt in karate, a rodeo athlete, and was known for his wild lifestyle. He admitted to having the FBI suspend mafia statutes and was even accused of hiring someone to threaten Joe Pesci in exchange for an expensive hotel room. Even after all that, he never stopped working from Elf. 2003, To Get Smart. 2008, Queen Bees. 2021, and his final role in Fast Charlie. 2023 alongside Pierce Brosnan. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of Sonny Corleone strangely mirrored his life while on screen. Sonny was a hot-tempered man who lived hard and was somewhat self-destructive in real life. James Caan was the same. He was a Hollywood bad boy, a man unafraid to live by his own rules, no matter the cost. The explosion on screen was the explosion in his real life. However, that energetic and stormy journey had to come to an end. On July 6, 2022, James Caan passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 82 from a heart attack due to coronary artery disease. He also suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and congestive heart failure. He was cremated at Eden Memorial Park Cemetery, one of Hollywood's most famous Jewish cemeteries. The legacy he left behind is a string of unforgettable roles and the life story of a man who lived fully with no regrets. John Cazale as Fredo Corleone in The Godfather. The character of Fredo Corleone was the embodiment of weakness, tragedy, and an endless sadness. He was the brother who was always overlooked, whose desire for respect led to betrayal and a tragic end. Fredo's fragility evokes both sorrow and deep sympathy. John Cazale's performance at the time, at age 37, was a haunting portrayal of a broken soul, reflecting the quiet loneliness of Cazale's own life. The career of John Cazale is one of the most miraculous and tragic stories in Hollywood. In just 6 years, he acted in only 5 films, and all 5 were nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. From The Conversation to Dog Day Afternoon, The Godfather Part 2, and The Deer Hunters, performances contained an incredible emotional depth. Director Sidney Lumet remarked, "Cazale had an endless sadness that was evident in every film, and then came the terrible news: terminal lung cancer." In 1977, Cazale was determined to finish The Deer Hunter despite his doctor's warnings. Robert De Niro even paid from his own pocket to ensure the production kept Cazale on. Knowing no one else could play the part, his life partner, Meryl Streep, was by his side every moment, trying to hold him here just a little longer. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of Fredo Corleone strangely mirrored his life while on screen. Fredo was a weak man, always left behind, and who lived a short, tragic life in real life. John Cazale was also a man with an inherent sadness and a heartbreakingly short career. Both were fragile souls crushed by a cruel fate. However, that journey of talent and sorrow had to come to an end. On March 13, 1978, John Cazale passed away in New York City at the age of 42. He was 42, buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Malden, Massachusetts. The Deer Hunter had not even been released yet. The legacy he left behind is a flawless, perfect career, proof that quality is more important than quantity, and the life story of one of the greatest actors of all time who left us far too soon. Alighieri as Virgil. The Turk Sollozzo in The Godfather. The character of Virgil the Turk Sollozzo was a memorable villain, a cold, cunning drug trafficker who dared to challenge Vito Corleone and ignite the entire war. Lettieri brought to life a character so terrifying that even the Don himself was wary of him. Al Lettieri's performance at the time, at age 44, was an authentic portrayal of a man of the underworld. What makes this performance so memorable is that Lettieri hardly seemed to be acting. Fluent in Italian and rumored to be related to Genovese crime, family boss, Tommaso Eboli Lettieri lived and breathed the world he portrayed. Al Pacino later revealed in his 2024 memoir that it was Lettieri who took him to meet real-life mobsters to help him better understand the role of Michael Corleone. Before The Godfather, Lettieri often played gritty anti-heroes, alongside major stars like Marlon Brando in The Night of the Following Day, Steve McQueen in The Getaway, and Charles Bronson in Mr. Majestic Weather. Playing a tough guy or a charmer, Lettieri never seemed to be acting. He was just telling the truth. But behind the curtain was a man obsessed with vice. He lived like a gangster, addicted to alcohol and cigarettes, partying all night and falling into 2 failed marriages. Friends said he always looked tired, as if he knew his time was running out. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the line between the role and the real. Al Lettieri barely existed. While on screen, he was a man of the criminal world. In real life, he lived a similar life. He brought the authenticity of the underworld to the screen, but he also paid the price for that authenticity with his own life. However, that authentic and dangerous journey had to come to an end. On October 18, 1975, just 3 years after The Godfather brought him international fame, Al Lettieri died of a heart attack in New York City at the age of 47. His passing left a great void. The legacy he left behind is not just his roles, but the life story of a man who lived and died exactly as he had chosen. Richard S. Castellano as Peter Clemenza. In The Godfather, the character of Peter Clemenza was one of the pillars of the Corleone family. He was a loyal and intelligent capo regime who taught Michael how to use a gun, and is famous for the classic ad-libbed line, "Leave the gun, take the cannoli." Richard S. Castellano's performance at the time, at age 39, brought a warmth and practicality to the brutal world of the mafia. He had also been nominated for an Oscar for Lovers and Other Strangers, 1970. Castellano was a familiar face on both television and film, having starred in The Super 1972 and Joe and Sons, 1975 to 1976. He often played gruff but lovable Italian-American fathers with a mix of toughness and charm. However, he did not return for The Godfather. Part 2 reportedly due to a dispute with director Francis Ford Coppola over creative control of the dialogue. His absence was perhaps the beginning of his gradual fade from the spotlight. Castellano also struggled with poor health and personal pressures. He faced heart problems and industry stress which took a toll on his relationships. He was married twice. One marriage ended in divorce, the other, though it lasted, became strained as his health declined. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of Clemenza was a peak his career could never surpass. While on screen, Clemenza was a vital character in real life. After leaving that role behind, Castellano's career never seemed to regain the same level of prestige. His stubbornness, whether in defense of his creative integrity, may have also contributed to his later obscurity. However, that promising but short journey had to come to an end. On December 10, 1988, Richard S. Castellano died suddenly of a heart attack at his home in North Bergen, New Jersey, at the age of 55. His early death left Hollywood mourning a talent that never got to fully shine. John Marley as Jack Woltz. In The Godfather, the character of Jack Woltz was the embodiment of Hollywood arrogance. He was a powerful movie producer whose defiance led to one of cinema's most iconic and horrifying scenes, the discovery of a severed horse's head in his bed. John Marley's performance at the time, at age 65, in a brief but immortal role, Marley's terrifying scream became an indelible image in 20th century cinema. Over a 45-year career, Marley appeared in nearly 250 films and television shows. He won the Volpi Cup at the 1968 Venice Film Festival for John Cassavetes' Faces, and was nominated for both an Oscar and a Golden Globe for his moving performance in 1970's Love Story. But it was The Godfather that made his permanent mark on pop culture despite his limited screen time. Despite a prolific career, Marley never achieved a list stardom. That obscurity sometimes frustrated him. He was married twice and had 3 children, but his final years were marked by isolation and declining health. His second marriage to Beverly was affected by his reclusive nature and his heart disease. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems his fate was an irony. While on screen, his character was a man of great power in real life. Marley was a hard-working actor who never quite reached the pinnacle of fame. The scene that made him immortal was also the only scene many people remember him for, a prolific career reduced to a single scream. However, that dedicated but quiet journey had to come to an end. In 1984, at the age of 76, John Marley passed away after open-heart surgery. He was buried quietly at Cedar Park Cemetery in Emerson, New Jersey, a modest end befitting a man who once screamed his way into movie legend. Al Martino as Johnny Fontaine. In The Godfather, the character of Johnny Fontaine was the singer Don Corleone's godson, who begged the Godfather to save his dying career. The character's story mirrored Al Martino's own story of mafia entanglements, career decline, and quiet despair behind the spotlight. Al Martino's performance at the time, at age 45, brought a startling authenticity. In the early 1950s, Martino rose to fame with his hit Here in My Heart, his first #1 single in the UK. But fame came with danger. The mafia reportedly bought his contract and extorted $75,000 from him. Fearing for his life, he fled to England, living in exile while his American career collapsed. The role of Johnny Fontaine was originally offered to Vic Damone, but Martino, allegedly with the help of crime boss Russell Bufalino, pressured the studio with negative press. Damone, fearing retaliation, dropped out, and Martino won the role back. In essence, he became Johnny Fontaine by living the character's life. Martino was married 3 times, with the first 2 ending in divorce. He struggled with alcoholism and financial problems later in life, but remained beloved for his warm baritone voice and his presence in the Godfather films. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems art imitated life perfectly. The story of Johnny Fontaine wasn't fiction. It was the story of Al Martino. He didn't need to act, he just needed to tell his own life story, a life full of music, loyalty, and quiet regret. However, that journey of music and drama had to come to an end. He died of heart failure on October 13, 2009, just 6 days after his 82nd birthday, at his home in Springfield, Pennsylvania. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in California, his story ending just like his most famous role, with echoes of music, loyalty, and quiet regret. Richard Conte as Don Emilio Barzini. In The Godfather, the character of Don Emilio Barzini was a fearsome villain, a rival boss with an ice-cold face who silently orchestrated the film's bloodiest betrayals. Richard Conte's performance at the time, at age 62, brought a quiet menace, a venomous snake hidden in the shadows. In real life, Conte shared his character's ambition and tenacity. He worked as a truck driver, a singing waiter, and a shoe salesman to make a living. While working at a resort in Connecticut, he was discovered by Elia Kazan, a meeting that changed his life. During the 1940s and 1950s, Conte rose to stardom in crime dramas and film noir, starring in Cry of the City, Whirlpool, and The Big Combo. With his chiseled face and commanding voice, he became the archetype of the elegant but dangerous villain. However, Conte's personal life was fraught with difficulties. He was married twice. His first marriage, to actress Ruth Story, ended in divorce, while his second marriage to Shirley Garner lasted until his death, but was marred by health problems and financial worries. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of Barzini was the culmination of a career always associated with tough guy images. While on screen, Barzini was a powerful Don in real life. Conte also had to fight relentlessly to achieve his position. His on-screen coldness was the result of a life of hard work and experience. However, that hard-working journey had to come to an end. On April 3, 1975, Conte suffered a heart attack and a massive stroke. After 8 hours of fighting in the intensive care unit at UCLA Medical Center, he died on April 15th at the age of 65. He was buried at Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles next to Hollywood royalty where he belonged. Sterling Hayden as Captain McCluskey. In The Godfather, the character of Captain McCluskey was the personification of corruption and brutality. He was a crooked cop who paid with his life for daring to cross the Corleone family. Sterling Hayden's performance at the time, at age 56 though, lasting only a few minutes, left a deep impression thanks to his massive physique and tormented eyes. At 64, Hayden was once considered the most handsome man on screen in the 1940s. However, he despised Hollywood fame, seeing it only as a means to make money for his true passion, sailing. He crossed oceans, disappeared from film sets, and lived for the sea. That pursuit of freedom came at a personal cost. He endured 2 failed marriages to actresses, Madeleine Carroll and then Betty Ann DeNoon, and became estranged from his children, plagued by alcoholism and guilt. He often blamed himself for selling out to Hollywood. "I never wanted to be an actor," he once said. "I just wanted a boat and an escape." Despite his aversion, Hayden delivered memorable performances in noir classics like The Asphalt Jungle and The Killing, and made a triumphant return as the deranged General Jack D. Ripper in Dr. Strangelove. His brief role in The Godfather was emblematic of his own inner conflicts. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of a man corrupted by money mirrored his own disgust for Hollywood. While McCluskey sold his soul to the mafia, Hayden felt he had sold his soul to the film industry. Both were men torn apart by their own choices. However, the journey of that rebellious soul had to come to an end. On May 23, 1986, Sterling Hayden died of prostate cancer in Sausalito, California, at the age of 70. A sailor, an actor, a rebel, and a soul torn between duty and desire. He remains one of cinema's most compelling enigmas. Abe Vigoda as Salvatore Tessio in The Godfather. The character of Salvatore Tessio was the symbol of quiet betrayal. He was a once loyal capo regime who ultimately betrayed the Corleone family. Though his role was limited to the first film, Tessio became an icon, and Vigoda played him with a chilling calm and resignation. Abe Vigoda's performance at the time, at age 51, brought a deep sadness to the act of betrayal. In real life, Vigoda was as famous for not being dead as he was for his acting. In 1982, People magazine mistakenly reported his death, forcing him to pose in a coffin holding the article to prove he was still alive. This became a decades-long running joke on TV and the internet, and Vigoda himself often indulged in the morbid humor. He was married twice but found no lasting happiness in either relationship. After the death of his second wife in 1992, he lived a reclusive life, openly admitting his frustration at being typecast in supporting roles which limited his artistic development. However, Vigoda's quiet, intense demeanor turned that limitation into his legacy. His line, "Tom, can you get me off the hook?" is one of the most quoted lines in mafia history. The most thought-provoking thing is the connection between the role and his life. It seems his career was a betrayal by the industry itself, while Tessio betrayed the family. Vigoda felt Hollywood had betrayed his talent, and like Tessio, he had to accept his fate with resignation. The running joke about his death was also an irony. A man who was dead in his career lived a very long life. However, that long and tumultuous journey finally came to an end. His death on January 26, 2016, at the age of 94 at his daughter's home in New Jersey, was no longer a rumor, but the end of a long and eventful life.